we're going to look at 5 things to start doing to retire as soon as possible. We've helped a whole lot of clients plan for successful retirements, but one of the biggest mistakes we see is that people do not assess the proper factors in timing their retirement. Today, primarily we talk about 5 things that people need to do correctly to time the right retirement.
Let's get to it.
Okay.
So
I'm sure there's more than 5, but
there are more than 5.
You've culled this down to 5 important things.
If you get these 5 right, you got a good shot. Okay. So
cool.
Some of these are quantitative, more numbers based. Some of these are qualitative,
okay,
more, lifestyle and values based.
Okay.
And I like to have a little bit of a mix there because both of these things matter. And a lot of times what I find in most of these conversations, it's almost always only quantitative.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't do a good job with the quantitative stuff if we don't understand the qualitative stuff. Why does it matter that we get it right?
Yeah. People need a good quality retirement, just not a retirement.
I mean, it would seem obvious that that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I ask people like, hey, they're like, I want to retire. I'm like, okay, tell me about that. Like, why? Like, well, I don't like my job. Like, oh, it sounds like you might just not like your job.
Like you get a different job.
What are you gonna do when you retire? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Okay, let's think about it. Because what we find, especially with elder law, is that people that don't have a plan when they move into retirement, sometimes they struggle, and a lot of times they get unhealthy quick. I mean, purpose is very important in retirement. So that's one of the things that we're gonna talk about. The first one is you need to assess your financial readiness. Now, this is going to seem pretty basic, but you need to take a snapshot of your financial picture and figure out exactly what you got. Most of the time when I am, onboarding a new client, I say, hey, send me the personal financial statement, send me your balance sheet. We need to understand where things are and how they work. And they go, huh?
My what?
And some people have it. It's if you do great, be excited about it. But this is basic, just to take an inventory of what you got. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make a plan when we don't know what's in the suitcase.
And I think people truly don't know. There was this sweet little man that I went to church with, and his wife was going into the nursing home. And so we had to disclose all of his assets. And I said, okay, just bring everything. And he's this little short, rotund guy wearing overalls that you wouldn't think had $20,000 in the bank. And I said, just bring it in. We'll look at it. And so he brings it in, pops it down. And I'm like, okay, you have 300,000 here. You have 200,000 here. And I just start going through this, and he's just kind of like, yeah. And I'm like, so you're worth $1.2 million. He's like, no, I'm not. And I said, okay, what did I look at wrong? And he's like, well, what are you looking at? I said, the bank statements you brought me. And he's like, I got $1.2 million. I said, yeah. He's like, didn't know that. Okay. A lot of people don't know that.
It's true. And, I think some people err on the other side here where they obsess over it. Mm-hmm. There's really 2 types of folks. There's folks who they update the spreadsheet every night or every week. Oh, yeah. And then there's other folks who, and it's okay if you're either one of them, we still love you, but there's other people who they got a box with the statements in it, and they don't want to open it. They don't want to look at it because
I'm the latter.
They don't want to deal with it. Honestly, most people are,
I know.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
But they don't want to deal with it because then they got to face the implications of that.
Sure.
Which are real. But if you're watching this, you're probably looking for a little bit of courage to go, okay, let's get this done.
Let's get this.
We want to do this, and so that's it. This is a great first step. Let's take an inventory of what you own, what you owe, and let's figure out how to make it all come together and work for you. So the next one we want to look at, and this is part of this, but once we get an idea of what you have, we need to create a retirement distribution plan or a spending plan, okay? And so what that is when you retire, you're not working anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm saying stuff that's super obvious, but I need to phrase it in this way so that your mind can put it together. You're not getting a paycheck anymore, so your assets have to turn into income. And what's the strategy to do that? How are we going to execute that? Mm-hmm. And for some folks, historically, if you've just had big pensions and Social Security, this is a pretty straightforward thing to do.
Yeah.
For most folks that we see that are retiring now, they don't have pensions. They might have multiple accounts. They might have multiple 401ks or IRAs. And the question is, okay, when do we take what from which account? And just winging it's not going to probably be a good long-term strategy.
Major tax issues there.
And figuring out how much tax is involved here is a big part of this quantitative piece. Mm-hmm. So once you figure out what you got, the next thing you got to do is how much income can you create without running out of money, and what's it going to cost to get it out, i.e. what's the tax bill? Okay, so that's kind of the second piece is, how are we going to create income in retirement? Okay, it's great that you want to retire. How are we going to pay for it?
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. The third one, we're running through this really quickly. We don't have a ton of time today, but we're running through this quickly because we want you to have some stuff that's actionable. The third one is kind of similar, but it's a little bit different. And to me, this borders on qualitative. Okay, it's quantitative and qualitative. So we said, how are you going to create income was the last one. This one is create a spending plan. You're watching that going, Ian, those are the same thing. They're different.
Yeah.
So what I didn't say is create a budget.
B word.
We don't say the B word in our office. But I joke about that a little bit. But to me, that word has a ton of baggage with it. Budget has a lot of baggage with it, and it's not as proactive as I think we probably want to be. But if transitioning to retirement is about spending, let's do that intentionally. This is the idea that I want to communicate, is that we want to spend intentionally, and it's not a bad thing to spend money.
Well, like you've said today or in previous videos, sometimes while people are working, they are in a very non-spending mode. Save, save, save. Sometimes we tell people you are allowed to spend money. It's not like, probably in my case, it's like, Todd, stop doing this, stop doing this. Some people are like, I can actually go on a trip. Yeah, you have plenty of money. You can spend $10,000 or $15,000 and go on a trip and enjoy yourself. And they're like, huh. It's just like you just open up a new world to these people.
It's a change of perspective. And when it comes to a spending plan, there's two parts to it. There's the quantitative part, the numbers part. We got to get that right. We got to be able to actually pay for what you want to happen. Then there's the qualitative part. What do you want to happen and why is that important? And the reason I bring that up is because if you don't have clarity on what it means for you or your family to spend money well, hear that again, spend money well. The way that you spend money well is different than the way that I would spend money well. But if we're going to have a successful retirement, we need to have an intentional spending plan, which means you know what it means to spend money well, and you're going to do it with confidence.
Yeah.
That's the qualitative part. I always get stuck on that. That's the qualitative part, the why this matters. And so if you have a sense of this going into retirement, you're going to be able to do it more successfully.
Yeah.
And it's a huge thing. So that's a key piece. Let's go to the next one. The next one is kind of tied to this, and it's a function of it. But this is pretty much all qualitative. But I think this is something that gets missed almost all the time in retirement planning discussions. I tend to be a little bit more quantitative than qualitative.
Really?
So the fourth thing is going to be to evaluate your emotional readiness. Now, this sounds a little touchy-feely, and Todd, you know that I'm a really touchy-feely guy. We were just joking a minute ago that sometimes my wife has to remind me that I do have emotions, but I tend to be more quantitative than qualitative generally. But this is really important, and I think this gets missed in a lot of discussions about retirement readiness, which is, are you ready to retire? Not just numerically, but emotionally. And that is, what are you going to do when you retire? Okay, you want to stop working. What are you going to do? What are you going to spend your time doing? This is part of creating a spending plan, but it's not a monetary spending plan. It's an energy and time spending plan. What are you going to spend your time doing in retirement? Why does that matter?
And if you're married, does your spouse agree with that?
Yeah.
I'm actually watching The Crown on Netflix right now, and we're to the point. The queen is older, and her husband, Prince, or Royal Highness, whatever, the queen's husband, he loves to go and blow. She likes to sit at home. And so him being gone all the time, because that's what he wants to do, is causing a stress within the marriage. And they're getting through it, but it is something that you and your spouse need to talk about this. It's like, do we want to do the same things?
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we do everything together. And I know some couples that they vacation separately.
That's interesting.
It just blows my mind. But yeah, I mean, that is something that some people do. And if you want to go do something and your spouse doesn't, y'all need to work that out. But that does need to be part of your retirement plan. Y'all need to talk about that.
And figure out, you don't have to have every day mapped out. That's not what I'm telling you. But what I am telling you is that retirement is much more challenging than most people care to admit. And humans really do need a sense of purpose in order to be well and to feel well. And if you don't have a clear vision of how you're going to transition from your work that gives you purpose, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, and retirement, which is just a different type of work and a different lifestyle, if you don't have a plan to transition, it's going to be tough.
It is.
You know, and maybe there's some stages too, and for a lot of people that is a good way to be successful with it, is to have a slow transition to retirement. But I really tell folks, hey, let's get the next, you know, year and a half, 2 years, let's think of what are some big key things that you would like to accomplish from a non-monetary, non-work perspective, and let's create a plan to accomplish those.
Sure.
And if you feel a sense of accomplishment going into retirement, you're going to get momentum.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's a big thing that gets overlooked. The last piece here that we need to talk about is how we're going to pay for healthcare and potentially long-term care if that comes up. Now, this is a little more specific than anything else we've talked about, but you need to have a plan to pay for healthcare and how to manage those costs. Depending on when you retire, that can be a simpler plan or a more complex plan. But the reason I bring it up is because if we're not careful, second to taxes, healthcare expenses can be some of the largest expenses in retirement. And frankly, most Americans are woefully unprepared for that.
Well, and that's where I come in. This part of this duo is, you know, I help people pay for long-term care. And so we'll probably do an entire show on this, but let me just say right now, one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to spend all of your money on the nursing home. You do not. Okay. Get in touch with ideally a certified elder law attorney. If you are looking at long-term care expenses, you will be shocked to learn what we can do with the Medicaid rules to get a person on Medicaid, particularly a married person. We can protect almost everything up to and above $1 million and still get that person the care that they need, and they don't lose everything doing it. And so that's a whole nother show, but there are techniques to do that.
It's important to know not only the rules, but how to apply the rules, I think is the idea here, you know? And so when you're getting ready to retire, the questions I like to ask are, what is the plan for blank? And the way that I would phrase this one is, what is the plan for paying for healthcare in retirement? And then the follow-up is, for most people, it's Medicare. Some people retire early, and so we've got to bridge that gap, right? That's why that's a question. Or some people are on, you know, on their plan from work still for a little while, or have plans tied to their pension. That's great. The follow-up question is, what's the plan to pay for long-term care? And if you don't have a plan, we need to create one. If that were to be a problem, statistically, 2 out of 3 people are going to have a long-term care event that they're going to have to pay for in their life.
Yeah, and there's some cool long-term care insurance out there now. There were some hybrid plans that for the last few years have honestly not been that good, but with interest rates and different things, they are getting better. And so if you are thinking about long-term care insurance, definitely give us a call, because that is something we can walk you through. I, with my Medicaid knowledge, Ian with his tax and different things there, we can walk you through a really good plan that's out there.
You know, really the great white shark of retirement is long-term care. People aren't really paying attention to it. They don't have a plan for it, and they're hoping it doesn't strike. But that needs to be a whole other show that we do. So those are the 5 things to do to get ready to retire. And look, there's other things that are involved too. I understand that. But if you get these right, if you have a plan for these, how you're going to create income in retirement, what you got and how it works, you know, how you're going to pay for healthcare or long-term care if that happens, what's kind of redefining your purpose as you transition into retirement, and creating a plan to spend well, spend intentionally, both your time, your energy, and your attention, you're going to make it. You're going to be okay. There are more things, but if you get those 5 things right, I think you're going to have some success in retirement. Now, we didn't talk about anything that is exactly specific to your situation, but if you want to create the most effective game plan for your retirement using your assessment, your readiness, your spending plan, your purpose plan for retirement, go ahead and click the link below. We'll have a conversation. We'll help you think through some of these things, and we'll help steer you and guide you along the way. So look forward to talking to you soon, and see you in the next video.
Thanks.